Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I have Lisa with me here today. Thank you so much for joining me, Lisa. A mutual friend introduced us saying that we would probably have a great time on the podcast together. And I already in our pre-conversation, I agree that that will probably be true. So Lisa, please introduce yourself more and let us know what are some highlights of your womb centered healing journey?
Well, before I even introduce myself, thank you for having me on. I'm so appreciative to everyone who, takes the time to have me as a guest on their podcast. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this and for your listeners for listening to us, chit chat back and forth and stuff. I'm Lisa Peranzo. I am the founder and CEO of A Healthful Life. It is an online coaching platform that is designed to help women predominantly find their health, fitness, and nutrition again or level up on whatever it is that they're already doing. I have over 10 years of experience in the fitness industry. And beyond that, I have a bachelor's in psychology. I have my master's in human behavior. I spent a lot of time in corporate America finishing up all of that, working with victims of violence, predominantly domestic violence victims. So, big stuff. Um, and now I get to, take my what was side hustle into my full hustle and help everybody around me become better, whatever their version of better might be. This womb centered healing, it's so powerful to me. I love that because, like you were saying earlier when we were talking, everything goes back to that. And even just when we were pre-gaming it, as it were, before we started recording the podcast, I started thinking about the stories that my mom told me about when she was pregnant with me and, my development into adolescence and early adulthood, and now where I am now, having gone through pregnancy. I have a daughter. She's 5. She's she's 5. We'll just leave it at that. She's fantastic, but she's definitely 5. And how I've, especially since I've had her, really stepped into my femininity in an even bigger way than I think I have my whole life, and from this place of real strength. And I don't mean strength as strength, I think, can be seen as kind of a masculine phrase, masculine word. I don't mean it like that. Like, I've really stepped in and embraced my power and who I am as a woman and as a mother and as a wife and as a businesswoman and business owner and all these things. So I appreciate you for like triggering my thought process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious how you would distinguish masculine strength versus this feminine strength that you're experiencing as a new mom.
I think so. I was in the army for a little while, and that's where I got hurt. So when I was 19, I shattered, fractured, and dislocated my right foot. And like the basic overview, to not get too much into the weeds, when I was in recovery from that injury and coming back into, regaining my fitness, and I had to learn how to walk again and how to drive a car again. It was going after activities that were very male driven. Like, I started CrossFitting before CrossFit was a thing. There was one CrossFit gym in the town that I lived in, and that's where I went to because I was so used to like the testosterone drive that you get when you're around certain men who have really, really big personalities. And what happened over time was I began to learn that that kind of strength was really contraindicated for my body. And my body's way of showing me that it was contraindicated for me was by me getting hurt a lot more. And I'm certified CrossFit instructor, and I do train on CrossFit still from a completely different approach than most people, because my approach is, I want you to walk out of a workout and walk out of being in my presence feeling successful, feeling invigorated, feeling powerful in your own body. And maybe that means you're changing up a certain exercise because you're showing respect to your body, and that's how you need to do the exercise to do that. Maybe that means changing the weight around versus what would be listed as the prescribed weight, because again, you're honoring where your body is at and what your body can give you. So I think in some realm I kind of feel the difference between that masculine strength and that feminine strength in that regard, not in terms of the honoring of the body, but just in that, it's kind of hard to describe. It's like the energy that it brings forward to you and kind of what I feel as the energy coming into me. They're both beautiful energies, I think, in their own regard, and they're both very powerful, but they feel very different. I don't know if that makes sense. Like the vibe is very different.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like in some of the details that you shared that the typical masculine approach to those kinds of activities is to push through the pain. If your body is hurting or feeling not up to a given task, the typical approach, the masculine approach, would be push through it and force yourself to do it, and that there's benefits to that in that you exceed your limitations and you feel this sense of power over the thoughts that you might have had that told you you couldn't do it, or the limitations that your body put forth, and you feel powerful because of that. Whereas the more feminine approach says the body is giving you signals, and it's wise and better for you in the long run to listen to those signals, to become strong within the limitations that you might have in your body, and not push past those, because if you do push past those, you're going to be more prone to injury,
Right.
and more likely to injure yourself, and then you're really not in a strong place once you're injured. Although that, if you define strength as being able to overcome obstacles, getting injured and healing and overcoming that is just as strong as never having gotten injured, if not more so. And sometimes, like an injured bone, I know as a massage therapist, a bone that's been broken fortifies itself quite strongly, and can often feel like it's even stronger than the original bone that hadn't been broken in the first place. And so does that sound like kind of like what you're talking about a little bit, like the difference between those two approaches?
I totally do. And for me, and you know, I can only speak to myself and my own journey. I wouldn't speak to anybody else's. For me personally, that transformation was really me having to step outside of my head and let my ego go. I had to step into my body, I guess is the best way to put it. I had to let go of this preconceived notion that, like, this is what I should be doing, this is where I should be at, and step into this place of, okay, this is where I am right now. And I can either take the perspective of, like, oh my goodness, I'm such a failure, I'm so weak, I can't do this, like, ugh, you know, and that frustration. Or I could take it from a perspective of, you know what? I am so grateful that I woke up today, that I can move my body today, that my body can do this for me today. And this point that I'm meeting my body at, this baseline, this foundation, is not me failing. This is the starting point. This is the launch pad. And isn't there so much strength and power in that? And saying, okay, I'm here. I know I can level all the way up level 20 or 30 or wherever it is that I'm going, I know that I can get there, but I need to be realistic with where I'm starting at. And that's how I train people, even when it comes to like planning their actual legitimate workouts for the week, is to be so realistic and so respectful. Because then what happens is the expectations that you're putting in place are going to be realistic and attainable for you. And that's my goal, is for them to have very, very attainable goals so that they can get rid of me as a coach. Eventually, I can be the disposable coach. They will have all the tools that they need to be able to take these tricks and all this stuff on their own and know I can do this for me. I can, you know, honor my body in this way. I have everything that I need to do this.
It sounds like there's another nuanced, way of distinguishing between these, this more masculine and more feminine approach, and I just want to say that, we're classifying it as masculine and feminine because of that typical big personality masculine person that you might see. But I just want to say that I've seen that big masculine person embrace this other approach on more than one occasion. And it's a great, I have this one fitness coach that I work with that's all about the power of rest and getting away from the prescribed, I like high intensity interval training, right? So HIIT workouts. And his whole thing is getting away from the prescribed timing and having people self-regulate with rest. And so his whole thing, and he's this big masculine guy, and as his demonstrators are resting in their own time, he gets all big about, look at him resting. I love it when you rest. He does the whole thing instead of like push through. And it's such a different message, but that same tone of voice, it's really kind of discombobulating because you're expecting a different message coming through with that tone. But instead he's saying, yes, for rest. I love it when you rest. Rest, rest, rest. It's just like, whoa, okay, different kind of thing, And so I'm just saying that many masculine people are starting to see the benefits of this kind of wisdom, of sovereignty. And this is the point I wanted to get to, which is instead of this authoritarian power over model that we're talking about that's so common and that we've come to expect from those big masculine personalities, that they're the authority, that the schedule, that the predetermined schedule of workouts, of weights, of what you're supposed to do, it has a greater authority than what you feel going on in your body, and that you're supposed to override what's going on in your body, in your life, in what's going on for you, and force yourself to live up to what the authority, whether it's the trainer or the program, is requiring of you, and that creates this authoritarian model that creates dependence. Like people can't really keep forcing themselves like that in a sustainable way without this gnarly authoritarian like slave driver keeping them going. Instead, we're waking up to the fact that actually, if it's going to be sustainable, if we're truly going to be empowered, okay, because in that authoritarian model, the authority is the one with all the power. And the ones following the authority can never become fully empowered without overpowering that authority. And maybe they do, but then that authority loses their power, right? So it's never a fully mutually empowering situation until you come to this partnership model where you're talking about, where each individual becomes a partner with their own body, where we're partnering with and receiving, listening to, incorporating the wisdom of the messages the body is telling, and the coach is even, the trainer is even a partner, and listening to their body and adjusting the program, listening to what's going on in their life, adjusting the program, not overpowering them with the trainer's program or the trainer's ideas of what's best, but empowering them to the student to or the trainee, I don't know what the term is for that, but
I like student. I'm no student.
yeah, student, and giving them the power, your students and your trainees, the power to make wise decisions and choices and make their own plans and make their own goals. That's in partnership with, your program might have some really good information. It might have some tools and things that they learn that give them more power. But if it becomes the authority, then they lose their sovereignty. So this is something that I talk about a lot in lots of different arenas, that we're healing from the long-term effects of authoritarian social structures and systems. And it's right here in the fitness world, very obviously, in what you're talking about. And that we kind of call that authoritarian way the masculine way, but it's not really a healthy masculine.
Exactly.
Healthy masculine can be in partnership and in sovereignty with the feminine, with themselves. That partnership, I feel we need to reclaim partnership skills as a part of healthy masculinity. And many are doing that, and much to everyone's benefit, because we really need that kind of masculine strength. But when it comes overpowering, overbearing, and authoritarian, that disempowers and takes power away from everyone else, that's when it becomes unhealthy for everyone, even that masculine person.
I totally agree. And I like that you're making the distinction between like masculine energies and even just like that connotation of the word, that we're not, you're not stereotyping one thing. You're talking about like a very specific kind of energy and how it feels. And I also like how you're talking about how these two entities come together, because to me, what you're speaking to is balance of the body on I'm a fitness professional. It's balance of the body, balance of the mind. I feel like if I can get those entities for a person to act in a harmonious manner, then they're going to be healthier in their life long term. And that's what I'm trying to create for them, is not, I don't want the cookie cutter thing. I don't want the thing that's over in 30 days. I want the thing that is long lasting, because they're coming from a place of balance. And when I first started A Healthful Life, that was such a hard concept for me to convey to people. This idea of balance, and how balance is different for every single person, because a lot of people were coming to me and what they were expecting was like that dictatorship of like, you tell me what to do for my workout Monday through Friday, and I'll do it and I'll get results after 30 days. And when I would tell people like, no, we're working in partnership together with your body to figure out what works the best for you, because that's what I had to do for myself. I had my foot injury and I recovered from that, and I utilized quote unquote masculine as well as feminine ways to rehab that. I got into Pilates. I'm actually a certified Pilates instructor as well, so I bring that to my clients too. And I do yoga. I'm not a certified yoga instructor though, I will say that. Yoga is like my thing that I won't teach. We'll leave it at that. And I utilize all of those things to bring my body into balance. And then because this is womb-centered healing, so I have endometriosis, adenomyosis, and before I got pregnant with my daughter, I had PCOS. And there were some other fertility issues going on, and we had like a 1% chance of conceiving naturally, and we did. So she literally is my miracle baby. I have since reversed the PCOS on my own through nutrition, which my doctor was shocked about because it's a hereditary issue. It wasn't an issue in terms of like weight. So I think that's the other way that PCOS can become problematic for people. And I had, it was so funny because I had a very hard pregnancy and I had to come out of work and go on disability. But in reflection on it, I never thought of it as hard. I loved being pregnant with her and going through that process and, feeling her move and seeing the changes in my own body. Like that was so powerful to me. And it was like very deep to me on an extremely spiritual level. And you probably will get something out of this. I'm Pisces and I've always been a swimmer. I've always been into water. I'm definitely the fish. And I found myself in water and floating so much more when I was pregnant. Like every single day, getting into that environment. And I think it was reverting me back to like very early womb stages of my own experience. And then I went to, labor and delivery. And actually, she's getting ready to have a birthday coming up here pretty soon. It's Libra season around my house. And I had a very rough labor and delivery. It was not, I didn't plan for anything specific. I didn't have a birth plan. Really was stepping into that process as like, I will be taken care of and I will be okay. I had whatever, trust in God, faith in God, the universe, whatever. I had that. And it was bad. And that happens. But then it was still after that point, finding how I was going to recover in ways that were respectful to my body. There we go. And ways that honored me. And that definitely was taking a step back, letting go of my ego and going, okay, this is where I'm at right now. Where do I go from here? And my truest approach to it, I didn't focus on the weight loss aspect of being postpartum. I focused on the healing aspect of being postpartum. Like I just had faith, like the weight will come off. It will go away. My body knows it doesn't need it, but I also know that it's not going to be healthy for me to lose the weight in like a 4-week period of time. It will do it as it's ready to do it. And it did. And then it was, how do I bring every aspect of me back into balance as a new mom with a baby that does, new mom, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing some of the times. How do I bring all these things together? And then that got applied to my bigger fitness journey and starting a healthful life. Like, I know that I'm not the only person going through this. So how can I help other people with this and meet them truly where they're at? Not where I think they should be, not where they think they should be, but where they are actually at.
That's a challenging thing because we project so often towards these goals, and that's sort of another remnant of the authoritarian model of living life, is that there's some idea about what we should be achieving or accomplishing, or how things should be in order to be deemed successful and be able to feel good about ourselves. And so we get really pushy about, getting to our goals as fast as possible so that we can feel okay about our lives, when instead of a model that's more of a womb-centered model, which is more of like the loving, unconditional loving mother type model that says everyone is valid exactly how they are, even if they don't fit into that narrow, that just tosses that narrow definition of what a successful person looks like. And when we toss that away and see everyone as valid exactly where they are, then we can come into partnership in life and with each other and with ourselves. And some people are afraid to come into that approach because they're afraid to say, oh, well, then maybe I would just accept everything the way it was and not create any change. And yet, even when change was necessary, perhaps that I would discard my goals and not move towards something that would be better for me to be moving towards. But that's not the case. As you know, with motherhood, you're always holding a vision of the highest good and happiness of your child, but in partnership with and nurturing your child's natural development and loving them exactly where they are. And so, well, that ideally, now there may be
Right.
difficult passages where you're like, I wish this was over. Can you just get over this? Can you hurry up and get to the other side of this? And your child might feel the same way about learning or achieving something. But the difference is if you're pushing on yourself or your child and criticizing yourself all the time and judging yourself for not being over there and really pushing on it, that can create a constant sense of anxiety and stress that is detrimental in the long run. And I think it's something that many of us suffer from in our society, because that kind of goal-oriented, get to the top of the heap kind of rat race lifestyle is so detrimental in the long term for our health. And we've all internalized that to a large degree, just because that's how humanity has been, primarily operating for so long, is that you've got to get to the top of the heap or you're not going to get taken care of, at least here in the United States. And I think in other places in the world that are emulating, what's going on here, which, by the way, if you're in a different country and that emulation is going on, I don't recommend it. Yeah, there's benefits, but it's not healthy it's not, in the long run, it's not a healthy lifestyle. And many of us here in the United States are waking up to that and trying to shift things to a healthier lifestyle. So it sounds like your experience of going through, and I want to get back to your experience of pregnancy and birth. And I'm real curious about this experience of having this trust and faith that you'd be taken care of as you were going into childbirth, and then saying, like what you just said in your own words, that it was an awful experience, childbirth. I'm really be curious if you'd be willing to share more about that. And did that shake your faith at all, to have that kind of experience? And if you were to have another child, what would you do differently?
Well, unfortunately, we're not able to have any more kids. So that's,
Well, if you were to advise someone who were getting ready to have a child and go into childbirth, how would you advise them differently than what you did?
For me, being pregnant and the labor and delivery, I mean, I definitely, and again, my own personal journey, right? It's not in comparison to anybody else. And this thing happens when you get pregnant, and I don't know if, like, you have probably heard of this. And to me, it kind of speaks back to that authoritarian rat race perspective of people trying to one up each other on, like, the pregnancy story or the labor and delivery story. Like, let's call it like we see it. It could be traumatic. It could also be really amazing. But either way, your body is going through a huge transformation when you do that. Like, down to the molecular level, I felt like my body was going through a transformation. And in terms of, like, the delivery process, it was very weird, because nothing shook my faith.
Mm.
The only thing that I requested that was like, I need to have this, was I really wanted to have a doula in the room with me so that my husband and I could have that additional level of support. And I had an amazing doula. She and I are actually still friends. And she was pregnant when I was giving birth, which with her third baby, which was kind of funny, but she was phenomenal. And it was having people around me during that time who just loved and supported me. I went into it with the perspective of like, this is going to be whatever it's going to be. I can't control it because it is outside of my control. Like predestined, or however you want to say it, I just knew that whatever is going to happen is how it's going to happen. It did end up in an emergency C-section, which I would have not preferred, but that was the way that things went. That was the safest option for us. We definitely had, we gave it like the good old college try for it to not be that way. And I had doctors who were not quick to jump to that end, which I really, really respected. It was everybody really came together to support me. And so I felt like I'm good.
Well, when you're telling the story this way, I'm not seeing the horrible that you did earlier. So maybe the horrible was that you had a different goal, that you did have an idea that you wouldn't end up with a cesarean birth. And that was that the horrible, or were there some other?
No, no, we both almost died.
Both you
That
and
was
your, that was the horrible.
yeah, she and I both almost died. But even when that was like, even when that was happening,
Mhm.
because I very distinctly remember it, nothing shook my faith even then. It was horrible, and it was really, really scary. That's what I mean by horrible. It was scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, when you're used to, when it sounds like that's horrible in a certain sense, being at death's door, being at the door of perhaps losing your own life, and perhaps even worse than that, losing your baby's life, right? That losing your baby, that being at that potentiality, facing that potentiality and being out of control, for someone who, like yourself, like it sounds like, has always overcome things and had the, you know, that can be the most horrible of things, is being so out of control and facing the possibility. But it sounds like you had faith in that moment anyway, you know, and that it grew your faith, perhaps, like, instead of diminishing your faith. It feels to me like that was a blossoming of even greater faith than you'd ever had before. So sometimes it takes that horrible moment for us to grow like that.
I totally agree. And I think that what benefited me in that circumstance was I had already come past horrible trauma with my foot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was 19 years old when I got hurt, and the whole trajectory of what I thought my life was going to be in 30 seconds changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I had my moments of extreme anger, and it took me a long time to really grieve all of that. And that's what I would describe it as. I grieved that loss. And then having to step out of that grief and go, okay, well, this is a situation I'm presented with. What am I going to do with myself? What am I going to do with my life? And I had ample time to grieve, recover, heal, and all that stuff. So when I stepped into that situation of, you know, labor and delivery with my daughter, it was like, my faith had already been tested, and I knew that I could come through. I knew that I would be taken care of again, and I would be able to come through again.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out of that kind of with this surreal sense of like, oh my God, I can't believe that this just happened. But also looking at my daughter going, holy crap, kid, I am strong.
Mm-hmm.
You are really freaking strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like your resiliency has already been tremendously tested and you're hours old.
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking to like, she's only 5. She has a very long life ahead of her, I hope. How that initial test of strength and resiliency, how is that going to impact her as she grows and changes and all of these things and as she faces adversity?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really beautiful that you have an awareness of that impact. I talk to a lot of people about that initial blueprint of the pregnancy and the birth, and ask these kinds of questions that you just asked about your daughter. And a lot of people can't answer that because their mother was unaware of the impactfulness and didn't share it with them if she was. And, even talking about it or asking their mother is it would be a new thing. Whereas my mom always told the story of our birth every year at our birthday. And
Same.
and you have that same tradition, and I feel it's so influential for my work of recognizing my whole life the impactfulness of that story and that experience, and revisiting that in various healing processes that I've engaged with, recognizing that and reframing that blueprint for myself. And it sounds like having a mom like you who can hold the horribleness of standing at death's door hand in hand with you and your daughter for those moments in the same breath as the power of your faith and resiliency and ability to meet whatever arises, with presence, and your ability to do that. And in those moments, you're actively doing that, gave her that imprint. Like you were the model. You were modeling that kind of resilience, come what may, that kind of faith, that kind of power to meet life. You were modeling that for her through those moments. And you have you had the awareness of that while it was happening. And you have the continued awareness of that as you're being her mom, and being able to articulate that to her is such a powerful thing, and you recognizing that blueprint for her and honoring her in that. And every time she comes to face with a setback or a limitation of her own, and you being able to mother her through that with these skills that you learned from your injury when you were a young woman, and being able to mother her and meet her where she's at. What a powerful gift.
I love, you know what, you articulated that so well for me because her labor and delivery in that whole situation, like I said, that was the demonstration of like her strength and resiliency. So I inherently know that she's like a little badass. I can actually hear her singing outside my office door, by the way. You might hear that. She's so strong and she is so powerful. And she has a personality that is a little bit stubborn and will push all the way through. Okay, so I know that about her.
Mm-hmm.
So it like shaped my framework of parenting because now for me, I don't have to question those things about her. If she's faced with adversity, I have faith that she'll be able to get through. So then that gives me the gift to be able to focus on other aspects of her nature,
Mm-hmm.
and increasing those aspects of her. Like she's such a little empath. She's definitely a highly sensitive person. And I love that about her. And I see that at, 5 years old, and it makes me think like, what if she can hone in on that and develop those in a very safe environment where she can put proper limitations and boundaries into place so that she can respect her own energy while continuing to give to the people around her. Holy moly, what kind of adult is she going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like that's amazing thing to me
Mm-hmm.
because have to focus on like her being a resilient kid. I already know that she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having that already in place and that confidence. Well, and that confidence for you, you know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even if that was true for her, but you didn't have that confidence for yourself, it'd be hard for you to hold that baseline awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's great that it feels like in when you describe your birth story and your pregnancy story, it just feels like the two of you were like, okay, we're in this together, you know, come what may, it's you and me, kid, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just so rock solid and such a powerful alignment. It's really beautiful. And you know, whatever happened that made it so that you won't have any other kids, it just seems like so right, because this daughter is you and she are in something together that's really solid and really powerful.
And you know, it's really kind of not like haha funny, but like ironic funny about that because people will meet her. She's very confident in herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she is, I mean, she's how I wish I could have been in my earlier years. And people will sit there and they'll say, oh, like when she's a teenager, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have behavioral issues and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And part of me is like, why are we focusing on the negative? Why do we need to
Does
focus on
part
the
of you
negative?
want to punch them in the nose? Because my mama bear wants to punch them in the nose.
A little bit, or like a lot of a bit, because I'm
Yeah.
like, she, no, how is it a bad thing that she knows what she wants?
Yeah.
This isn't a bad thing at all. And like when people make those comments to me, the thought that I have in my head is what you just said, like we're in this together. And
Mm-hmm.
she knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think on a very, very deep level, she really is aware of that. And so, I mean, come what may, it's going to be whatever it's going to be. But I think if I can approach parenting from the standpoint of meeting her where she's at, just like I would do with a client person, you
Mm-hmm.
know, meeting her where she's at, making those expectations be realistic of her, there's going to be more growth for her in a very authentic way than if I push my expectations on her.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the trouble that comes up during adolescence and the teenage years is not necessarily because of any problematic aspect of any individual teenager's personality. It has more to do with how we treat that transition in our society, which is
Mm-hmm.
with complete and utter neglect. I mean, yeah, especially for young women who are starting to menstruate and whose bodies are going through huge transformations. And the ways that we initiate young women and people of any gender into their full maturity as adulthoods is completely insufficient. You know, even just teaching people accurate biological information is completely insufficient. And so,
Oh my goodness.
and so
Thank you for
helping,
saying that.
yeah, and so coming up with ways and actually only starting to talk to young women, young girls about menstruation about at the time when they might be starting to, that's insufficient. Young girls need to be experiencing their mother's menstruation. They need to be having frank, candid conversations about what it means. They need to see their mothers creating ceremony for themselves around menstruation, if that's still going on, or ceremony around the fact that they might still have cycles, perhaps that, like moms who've had a hysterectomy or no longer menstruating for whatever that reasons they might have that. They need to still be honoring that womb space, and not only just so that the young girls can see that their mom's doing that, but because of the beneficial effects it has on their emotional wisdom and their ability to have healthy relationships with their daughter and with their other family members and their husband. And they need to be witnessing all the full spectrum of womb-centered living
Mm-hmm.
and if they're not experiencing that, if they're experiencing their mother's shameful about menstruation, regretful that about whatever health issues they had that that never got resolved in their womb, not really stepping into their full emotional wisdom, not having satisfactory sex lives, still having difficulty in their relationships, that those are the real reasons why when those young girls become teenagers, they feel out of this world, turbulent, because
And what you're
they're rebelling against. They don't want to. Oftentimes young teenage girls, they don't want to live the lives they see their mothers living, and so
right.
they rebel.
And what that kind of speaks to me, and I can reflect on my own experience going through puberty and adolescence, because I went through puberty at a very young age, like 10 years old. I was too young. It was way too young. And I wasn't, and it came from a place of shame. It didn't come from a place of pride. It was like, you take all of your feminine products and put them into a brown paper bag. Nobody explains to you how to use a tampon. I didn't know how to count my cycle until I got pregnant at the age of 30. Those should have been things that, I was given as a gift to say this is how, because what that would have given to me was, I knew I had PCOS when I was 16. I didn't know it was PCOS. I knew that something was wrong because every single one of my friends was on like the 28-day cycle except for me. And help was never sought. And I kind of think like, because it was refused. What would that journey have looked like for me? Because what happened was it turned into more of a place of shame for me because, I developed very early. At like 8 or 9, and I was the first one who had to like wear the bra, and I was the first one with the period and the whole thing, and I was the first one to like get hair on my legs, and then I got bullied and made fun of, and I didn't have that safe space to like talk about how it made me feel. And my husband and I will talk about that experience, like my experience in that now a lot in relation to how we talk to our daughter, because she definitely sees that whole cycle with me, and she's very aware of all of that and stuff. And it's not a big deal for her. I mean, that will probably transition as she gets older, I would anticipate, but it's not like a gross thing.
Well, and the conversation's already started. Like, if like my mom, and I don't know if this was the case for you, but the conversation had never even been broached. It was so hidden and so shameful. And when she started bleeding at 10, she thought she was dying. And no one had talked to her about it. And I've heard this story so many times. And even if somebody had a conversation, oftentimes with a young girl, if she doesn't understand it. If maybe there was a one birds and the bees conversation with the slightest hint of that you might start bleeding one day, she still needs way more support and way more understanding than that like shameful, embarrassed birds and the bees conversation. She needs to know that this is really a natural part and a celebrated part of life. But boy, we could go on and on about this. This is one of my most passionate topics. So you really got me going here, and time slipped on by. But I've really enjoyed talking with you, Lisa. And perhaps we need to have a part 2 and get more into this, like preparing.
I would love to. I would love it.
Yeah, so maybe we'll schedule a part 2, but our time is kind of rolling down for today. How can people get in touch with you? I know you have this holistic healing health business that I'm imagining includes some of the things you've talked about that you've utilized for your own health and well-being, fitness and dietary nutrition, and maybe you can just give us a rundown of some of the other things that you offer in your holistic health business and how we can get in touch with you if somebody listening might want to connect with you.
The easiest way to get a hold of me is through the website, which is www.ahealthfullife.org. Everything is on that. So if they want to work with me privately, the application is on there. There's links to the workouts. There's links to my blog, the recipes, all that sort of thing. And all of my social media is linked on that as well. If they can't remember that website name, which fair, and I know you'll list all the things and, you know, the show description and stuff. If they're on Instagram, at Lisa Peranzo, just my first name, my last name, and everything links back to the website from my bio on my Instagram. So either way, they would be totally fine. I definitely think that we need to schedule a part 2 though.
Yeah, because we were just getting going there. We could go.
We were just getting going, girl.
We could go for a whole nother hour on these topics. Yeah, very rich. So thank you so much. And listeners know that you can find out more about the Womb Centered Healing Temple at wombcenteredhealing.com. And there's lots of wonderful womb-centered healing offerings there as well. So question.
And one more thing before we finish up. So I do this whenever I get to be a guest on a podcast because I'm so appreciative to you guys, not just for the work that you do, but for having me on as well. And I'm so appreciative to your listeners for taking time out of their busy days to listen to us go back and forth. So anyone who reaches out to me through your podcast and says, hey, I heard you guys talking, I will give them a discount on coaching.
Nice.
That's how powerfully I believe in what I do. I want it to be accessible to absolutely everybody. So if they bring that up, I will offer them a discount on coaching.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. All right.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, listeners. And that's all for now. Until next time.